Hi, everybody. I'm George, and this is the best little horror house in Philly, the show where we talk about the best horror movie ever made, according to our guest, at least. And today's guest is a very funny comedian and actor who you might remember from a great early episode of Hollywood Handbook. He's in our Robocop remake. He hosts the UCB Tournament of Nerds and more. He's a longtime screen junkie and man about town. Please welcome Hal Rudnick.
George, thanks for having me. Great to be here on this. You were on the cusp of spooky season here.
That's
It's about to
right.
turn October, so yeah, this really got me in the spirit. You helped me usher in my spooky season viewing. I like it.
Hell yeah. Well, that's the goal. We're stoked to have you, and yeah, it's right on the cusp of October. So this is really perfect entryway to it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your just history with horror, how it started for you and that kind of stuff. If you've been a long time fan.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I feel like in my later life now, I'm developing more of an appreciation for horror and just realizing there's so much nuance. There's so much more social commentary, humor, uh, just weirdness in horror besides just, the blood, the gore, the creatures, the killers. Those are all delightful. So there's so much to love about it because, there's commentary about the ills of the world. You watch, Freddy Krueger has more one-liners than Mike Myers or Borat. Like Freddy Krueger is like one of the funniest characters of all time, aside from the fact that he's a murdering child molester.
Right, right.
That aside, but although you wouldn't know it, sorry for like the
No.
sidetrack, but the Jackie Earl Haley uh, Freddy Krueger Nightmare on Elm Street remake,
Hmm.
man, that was so dull and
Yeah.
dry.
Ugh.
They really sucked the fun out of Freddy Krueger. But that aside, I feel like later in life I've started to develop this appreciation for what you can do with horror movies and that it is just a like a they're I don't know, it's such a many splendored genre.
Yeah.
And as a kid, I was very resistant. Like you and I were talking before the podcast started, and I know as a kid, like I remember The Exorcist was frightening, but then I just remember movies growing up, like seeing the commercials and being like, "Oh, I don't want to watch that. No way." But I've really started to develop a taste and appreciation for it. And when I heard from you, I'm like, oh, I thought it was a chance to maybe talk about a film that I feel doesn't get as much love as it should. But yeah, I will say this: I've started to seek out horror more in my life as as I get older because it is such an escapist release. Like
Hmm.
you just kind of like go along for this ride. It's fantastical, it's weird, it's larger than life. The blood, the gore. I mean, some of it is off-putting. Like, the I've been watching lately the Dahmer series on
Hmm.
Netflix, and that kind of rides the line because it's like, okay, it's almost like murder porn. When it
Yeah.
gets to something like that, or if you get to like some of the stuff in like some Eli Roth films like Hostel, like gore porn, or whatever, however you want to phrase it, like Human Centipede. You mentioned Screen Junkies. One of my worst, best horror experiences was we did a series of episodes on Screen Junkies where I would watch off-putting films with my mother. And like watching films that you would not want to watch
Right.
with a parent. And we watched two Shades of Grey movies, which was yeah a it was a fun experience in that it was like very silly, but then it
Yeah.
was also like, oh my god, there were definitely moments where I'm like, I don't want to be watching this with my mother. And then but the first one we watched together was The Human Centipede, and that was like pretty horrific, but also there's like not exactly gore porn. There's some like anticipation
Yeah.
porn. Like you're just waiting for something to happen. So Human Centipede was actually pretty boring until they like really got down to business.
Yeah, until the shoe drops, and then Human Centipede 2 takes that and goes, "Oh, you wanted an exploitation film all along? Okay, fine. Here you go."
Horrific, nightmarish.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's just a little bit. So I you know what, I have an affinity, and it's ever growing
Yeah.
because yeah, I'm just starting to realize just how glorious this genre can be.
Do you have a favorite subgenre that helps you when you're seeking something out to be more into it? Are you like, "Oh, I love vampires or werewolves," or "I just need there to be a sprinkling of comedy in it," or something?
That's a great question. Let me think about that. A subgenre. Well, you know, I love the movie Alien and Aliens.
Oh
And
yeah.
Alien is often, people debate, but that I think you can split it down the middle. It's a sci-fi horror movie.
Sure.
Uh, the creature in Alien. And then I love monsters. I've always loved monsters. When I was a little kid, we would go to the magic store, and at the, like, kind of like the store that Pee Wee Herman goes to in Pee Wee's Big Adventure, where he
Sure.
gets like the trick gum and everything
Yeah.
and the hand buzzer. Uh, so, and at the magic store, they had all of these glorious monster masks on the
Wow.
wall, and they were so cool. And I remember I got one like as a, as a gift, like because my parents knew how much I loved these awful monster masks, and it was a giant, like it was very much like a werewolf, and
Yeah.
like huge open jaw, fur around the sides. And I just remember throwing that on every Halloween from like, maybe like 9 years old to like 12 years old, like wearing that monster mask.
Hell
uh,
yeah.
and so I love monsters. I love creatures. So, and especially, so like Alien, Jaws has, that could be considered, it's a summer blockbuster. It's an action movie, but it's also, that is a classic, so many classic horror tropes,
Hell yeah.
and where that, and how the shark, Bruce the shark, is treated.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd have to say, just my affinity for monsters really calls to me, and then um, yeah, and action. So, and the movie I picked, it definitely has a lot of action,
Oh yeah.
and it's absolutely a horror movie, but it has some other tropes in it as well, I think.
Hell yeah. I'm a big believer in that genre is extremely flexible and things don't need to be one thing. So I totally agree. Alien sci-fi is just the optimistic version of like space horror basically.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, there's comedy in this. There's western elements, there's action, there's horror. There's so much to today's movie. And so let's get into it. The movie we're talking about today is The Devil's Rejects from 2005, directed and written by Mr. Robert Zombie. Now,
Yes.
Rob Zombie, very controversial figure,
Mm-hmm.
polarizing, some might say. And he is a pretty unique figure in terms, even within sort of his compatriots in the so-called Splat Pack, where he has a real distinct style and sort of group of people that he uses and everything. Do you find yourself liking Rob Zombie movies in general, or does this kind of escape the pack and become something that does stick with you?
This is a bit of an outlier, The Devil's Rejects, for me, but it does make me want to explore more Rob Zombie, although I'm a little wary after seeing the trailer about the new Munsters movie that he made. I haven't watched it yet. Have you watched the new
I
Munsters?
did, and I have to say that I actually did kind of enjoy it. It hit a similar vibe for me as like Hubie Halloween, where it was like
Yes.
very light. There's a corniness that they're embracing, and I was like, I could get behind this.
Yeah, I feel like my wife is a little bit tepid, a little timid going into horror movies, and I think The Munsters might be a good one to
Yeah,
put on, like just kind of a light monster movie
yeah.
when we
The
do a little
trailer did
pumpkin
it no
carving.
favors. It was
Yeah.
really,
The
it's really, it's fighting from behind the eight ball, I think, with that
yeah,
trailer
the
out there.
trailer made it look like the porn version of the
Yeah,
Munsters.
it wasn't
Just
good,
like
but
that quality of acting.
the performances are a little better than that. Especially there's a little bit of a Count Orlok character happening in there, and that's a particularly good and fun performance. But
Nice.
that's
Oh yeah, I know Daniel Roebuck played Grandpa Munster. I got
yes,
to be in a film with Daniel Roebuck, who was also in the Late Show or the Late Shift, whatever it was.
right.
The film about Letterman and Leno, their controversies in the '90s, and then he was also in a great like teen slasher movie, The River's Edge,
Oh, I
with
don't think I
Dennis
know that one.
Hopper. The
Ooh,
River's Edge from the '80s is
love
just
Hopper. So
it's like a psychological horror slash like just very dark teen coming of age story.
ooh,
Uh, but I got to be in this movie. Oh, what was it called? Uh, it was something like the Cowboys and the Space Babes, or Space Babes and the Monsters. It was a 70-minute, 65-minute, 70-minute pseudo feature.
sure.
Yeah, with Daniel Roebuck and a couple other like B C
Wow,
movie actors. This is
wow.
like in the year 2000.
Well, hey, it sounds like quite an experience.
Yeah.
Um, so in the late '80s, Robert Cummings, aka Rob Zombie, was working as a production designer on TV, but his band White Zombie was launched to fame after the music video for Thunder Kiss 65 was featured on Beavis and Butthead. White Zombie disbanded in '98, and Rob made a successful transition to solo work and film, delivering kind of the same style of trashy on purpose schlock horror via music and film alike. He's probably most known for Dragula off of Hellbilly Deluxe. And Hellbilly is also the term that a lot of people use to describe the characters in these movies, which I think fits. It fits.
Absolutely.
And I've always appreciated Rob. I will admit that I tend not to like his movies that I've seen. I haven't seen them all, but Monsters and this were like the first two that I really enjoyed. And this one in particular, obviously, I thought was much better than Monsters. But but um but I even when I didn't love the movies, I've always really appreciated what Rob Zombie was doing, just in terms of like it's completely sincere feeling. Like he knows it's silly, and I know it's silly, but we're all just having a good time goofing around, head bobbing in the Dragula with dudes in like devil costumes.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. Are his Halloween remakes or his Halloween reboots worthwhile, or do you feel like he really missed the mark on those?
I don't personally like them. I
Hmm.
know that there are some defenders out there who talk about sort of the way that media capitalizes on true crime and everything and what it does, like the ripple effects of the murder itself. But part of what I love about the original Halloween is that I genuinely enjoy spending time with Laurie and her friends and everything. And by design, the characters in his Halloween movies are so grotesquely unlikable. Like they are all yelling and cursing at each other and they hate each other. And there's not really anyone to latch onto in the same way where you feel like, oh, I don't want them to get killed because I'm enjoying spending time with them. Um, maybe they merit a revisit. It's been a long time since I've seen them, but at last look, they weren't for me.
Gotcha. Yeah, I hear you. And now I feel like Halloween, not to get too sidetracked, but it came back with bringing Jamie Lee Curtis back and everything.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the first offering of the latest Halloween movies. The second one, I feel like it already overstayed its welcome. And now there's a third one coming
On
out.
the way.
Halloween ends, coming to Peacock.
Yeah, I'm in a pretty similar boat. Although I will say that even though I thought Halloween Kills was bad, I was like,
Hmm.
I've seen not just worse slashers, but like worse in the Halloween franchise. So
Yeah,
like,
it's true. It's true. It was just like The whole commentary about mob mentality and everything, it was so
Evil dies
heavy-handed.
tonight. Hal.
Yes, man.
Um, but he Rob has also, in addition to the sort of sincerity and goofing around, though, he has also been insistent that art should make you feel something. So I think that all of his pushing people to the edge and everything is very intentional. It's meant to elicit a reaction. I did think it was funny that the way he gained financing for House of a Thousand Corpses was by designing the Universal Halloween Horror Nights ride, like an experience there, and they were just
Oh
like, "Oh,
yeah,
why not?"
that's pretty cool. I think I actually went to Universal Hollywood Horror Nights and went through his maze. It's pretty fun,
Hell yeah.
and yeah, and you got and I think you're like really putting your finger on something here that he wants his movies to be evocative. He's got a love for the genre. The guy fucking changed his name to Rob Zombie. He lives it. He breathes it. So there is an earnestness and a truth that's coming out of him, and I feel like this film is we're talking about today, Devil's Rejects, is the best manifestation.
Yeah,
Uh,
distills it.
yeah.
Um, Now the executives at Universal didn't really like what they got from House of a Thousand Corpses. It's very extremely violent, even though it is sort of tempered by cartoony exuberance. And so they were sure it would get an NC-17 rating no matter how they cut it. So they dropped it from the schedule. And it floated in limbo for a year until Lionsgate picked it up and it made 16 million at the box office. But the real way that it made money was Lionsgate, as one of the mini majors, was a studio that really took advantage of the DVD boom. They had a lot of movies that really found an audience on home video, with special features in particular being an appeal, including other movies from the Splat Pack, including Eli Roth's Hostel and Darren Lynn Bousman's early Saw movies. But also House of a Thousand Corpses did well enough to justify a sequel in Lionsgate's eyes. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I do think that it would be interesting to talk a little bit about this era of film, because this is actually one of the first movies from this sort of quote unquote gore porn, torture porn, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it. We talked about the original Saw, but that's pretty restrained compared to a lot of what came next. And there's a great quote from Sid Haig that I think primes things, where he says, quote, "Our fantasies have got to be more extreme than our realities to maintain some sort of balance. And since the reality that we're living in today is so out there, the fantasies just naturally have to assume a larger role." And so in post 9/11 America, a lot of filmmakers were sort of reckoning with the nature of our fear and how that might lead us to set aside ethics, reflecting a world where American complicity in torture was pressing. Dana Poland talks about how horror is not just among us, but rather part of us and caused by us. And a lot of these early 2000s movies in the torture porn environment put that on display. They lean more into the cinema of attraction, spectacle, and sensation over deep motivations, almost acknowledging the audience in a way. And one thing that I think is interesting that I do want to get your opinion on, just narrative structure wise, is that a lot of these movies tended to be episodic because the overarching idea would sort of inform the set pieces, which then informs the connective tissues. And a lot of people complain about this being like a huge issue for them. But for me, it kind of feels more like a musical almost, in that, like, it's just more of like a different narrative paradigm than a narratively focused movie. And so I'm curious if that's something that does tend to stick in your craw, or if you don't mind something that is sort of based around the set pieces.
You know what? I mean, I don't mind it. Like when you put it that way, when you think of it in terms of like, oh, like the same kind of structure or like the bones of a musical, it's, it is like a carnival of blood.
Yeah.
And it's a genre, how many Friday the 13th, how many Halloweens, how many Nightmare on Elm Streets. Like certain things have been done to death, pun intended, I guess. But how are you going to poke the audience? So I feel like, Eli Roth's films, they're manipulative, but you can't deny that they reinvigorated a genre a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. The reality of like, oh, like these people in the Saw movies are chained to a wall and they have to do X, Y, or Z. Otherwise, like, something even more gruesome is going to happen to them. Uh, like, it's these scenarios, they may be more like hyper realistic with the blood and the gore, but I think it's how you make a ripple in this current environment. So yeah, it's like a carnival of blood. So each piece, I think, talking about the set pieces, um, you know, I think Saw is the most evocative when it comes to that. Like that
Right.
really resonates. Like each trap, each puzzle, it becomes its own little game and its own little set piece. In the same way, like in a musical, like cue the next song, cue, oh, boy meets girl, or let's sing about our small hometown or
Right.
whatever. It's like the same thing. So I think that's a great comparison, actually. And yeah, it's yeah, thinking about them, I feel like I do have I'm warming to what they actually were, because you go, I compare it to comedy. Comedy tastes have changed and evolved because, a lot of stuff has become problematic. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing. I'm not one of these guys who's like, oh, cancel culture, get off my lawn.
Right.
I think consequences are a good thing for problematic behavior. But I will say this: back in the day when people did a sketch about something that might have been taboo, or did jokes about something that might have been taboo, not everything, but there was sort of like this common knowledge where it's like, hey, we all know that this is wrong,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so let's joke about it.
Right.
And I think in horror movies, it's and with these gore blood fests, it's kind of the same thing. Listen, we all know this is a dumb fantasy now, so let's blow out the world.
Right.
Let's take it to the nth degree and do it, and do this stupid, clearly wrong, despicable idea to the hilt.
Yeah.
And so I think those films, there's some merit to them in that way.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, especially because that's kind of what the initial detractors were bristling against. And I think that it's because it was such a change in the way that things worked that, the popular term for it is torture porn. It was coined by
Yes.
David Edelstein in an article that was lamenting their leaving grindhouses and becoming popular, basically. And
Mm-hmm.
in this article, he specifically charges the Devil's Rejects, among others like Wolf Creek and even parts of Reservoir Dogs, of being dehumanizing because it destabilizes audience identification through the cinematic language, in that things like the ear cutting scene, the camera frames it like you're there and you're part of
Mm-hmm.
it. And David felt that he was being unfairly made complicit in this action. And I think that there is like a certain level of people being like, well, depiction has become endorsement in a way that I think these movies are pushing back against on, and saying that we don't condone like the awful actions that the Firefly family does, but it's almost begging you to be more empathetic and be still able to relate to their joy despite not agreeing with what they're doing.
Yeah, it's pretty weird, the fact that, they turn this group that is akin to the Manson family and is also evocative of Texas Chainsaw Massacre and different killer clans of past of horror days of yore, that that it turns them into almost anti-heroes.
Right.
Like they're so and that's one of the things I kind of like about the Devil's Rejects. Like these people are the worst of the worst scum, at the bottom of the toilet, the latrine of humanity. Like
Outhouse for them, probably.
yeah, the outhouse, like just filth, like literally filthy, bad teeth, dirt under their fingernails. Man, these people must stink to high heaven.
Hmm.
uh, but they are there's something likable. There's something funny about them.
Definitely.
So it is almost disconcerting how Rob Zombie wants us to feel about this group of people that are doing these heinous extreme acts. So you know it's wrong, but there's something kind of like uh, kind of cool about like, wow, I'm laughing at the bad guy.
Right.
I'm enjoying the bad guy. And then you have a great William Forsythe performance in here as the sheriff, and he's not clearly a good guy. Like he commits like an extrajudicial murder in the freaking jail,
Yeah.
and like he's like and I think that's interesting depiction of law enforcement, especially now in this day and age. Uh, so, but there is, I hear what you're saying about feeling almost complicit in this act. It's like, wow, if I'm enjoying this, what does this say about me? And I'm not sure if did Rob Zombie want to make these characters so enjoyable so the audience would have to like come to this crossroads and be
Yeah.
like, how do I feel about this? But there's something so delightful about Captain Spaulding.
Oh
I
yeah.
love that. Like the clown makeup, it's just so weird. Sid Haig, who is a horror veteran, he plays this amazing weird character that runs some kind of like what is it, a play, like an adult playground that
Right.
different from the one, but come on down to, what was it, a used car lot? It was something.
Something.
Yeah.
He's got some crazy
Where
you
he
get the
wore
commercials going on and he gets
yeah, where he
interrupted.
wore clown makeup, and he loved to just go around in makeup, and I loved just like this evil clown
Mhm.
who is disgusting, yet you kind of have a soft spot for because he makes you laugh.
Right.
It yeah, it's really complicated, like the relationship with the Firefly family, because they're detestable, but they've also got
An
loads of
exuberance.
charisma. Yeah,
Yeah.
and exuberance and loads of charisma.
Definitely. And it's also interesting because in a lot of these movies, it feels like people who rail against their very existence are like scared of their morals crumbling. And so they'd rather not examine them at all, which is, in fact, what movies like Last House on the Left and Saw are playing with, sort of the disruption of your own moral code through like equal punishment retributivism, and asking like, when is torture justified? Where is the line that allows you to shed your moral code and go turn into them, basically?
I think when is torture justified? We need to ask Dick Cheney about that, George. Uh, did you see This Is America, the Sacha Baron Cohen miniseries?
Oh, I saw pieces of it, but then my HBO subscription ran out, or I
Oh,
think it was
sure, sure,
HBO,
sure. Yeah,
right?
no, I
Um,
don't blame you.
yeah,
Listen, you got to find someone to steal the password
I
from.
guess so. I
But
guess so.
yes, we're here to condone password stealing. Do it. Listen. Humanity needs to share passwords.
That's
Life's
right.
too short. The
That's right.
economy's too bad. Like having your own password in this economy.
Come on.
But there was a great scene in This Is America where Sacha Baron Cohen is wearing this costume and like heavily made up, and he's an Israeli self-defense instructor for the Mossad, and he's interviewing Dick Cheney, and he brings this bottle. It's like half a jug, for like a gallon jug, and he's like, "Mr. Cheney, this is my waterboarding bottle. Will you autograph it for me,
Oh
please?"
man.
And Dick Cheney's like, "Well, sure. I can absolutely say that this is a first."
Wow. Wow.
It was great,
Um,
but yeah, but I joke, but the the revelation that torture happened in Abu Ghraib and in or Abu Ghraib and in Guantanamo and all this, it similarly made us question our morals as a people.
right.
So it's like two completely separate things, but when you look at them, like, is the USA, this great country, capable of that?
What
And
the?
then and then looking at horror, it's like, wow, that's too real. Like when
Yeah.
Freddy Krueger or Jason does it, okay, it's a quick death, it's mindless, but some of these other situations, oh, it's a little too much. And like I mentioned, the Dahmer miniseries earlier, that's like a freaking car wreck,
Yeah.
because you know it's the worst thing. You want to look away, but then it's so freaking compelling because, like, well, Evan Peters, who's playing Dahmer, is so great, and Ryan Murphy, it really manipulates you into like wanting to see what this most deranged human being is capable of, and it's like hard to turn away. And
Yeah.
then it's like, oh, why am I? After I got stopped watching, after I shut it off, I'm like, oh, I feel dirty. I don't like who I am having just seen that.
Right.
But why did I sit through it?
There you go. Why? That's the question that they all force us to ask. And it's interesting because you touched on this a little earlier, but there is sort of a naturalism to the torture that's integral to making the other elements, like that question of when is it acceptable, a success. Because suddenly, if things are supernatural, that gets in the way of role reversals and understanding like intent and emotion and everything. And so the less real the depictions, the less real and less pressing the questions asked of the audience, by really forcing you to confront the reality, or what, the looking reality of what's happening. That's how you have to examine the reaction, sort of. Otherwise you can put up a barrier.
Mm-hmm. And there is a realism to this. And it's not just the violence. There's also well, and this is also violent at times, but there's a sexuality
Yeah,
throughout the film. I mean, you have like Sid Haig, and I want to talk at some point about just the list of amazing, like, who's who of co-stars in
definitely.
this film. But like with Sid Haig, who we mentioned was like had like a storied horror career prior to this film. Like in like his first scene, it's a dream sequence where he's having sex with like a famous porn star, former girlfriend of Charlie Sheen, Ginger Lynn Allen, and like the sex here, the realism of the violence. There's something, having it all mixed together. There's sort of like this throwback punk rock, and you mentioned earlier grindhouse, like you mentioned that review where it said he takes it out of the grindhouse, but I think this in so many ways, this film is an homage
Definitely.
to kind of the lawlessness of the 1970s.
Definitely.
Like, yeah, and that's one of the things that I love about it. It's raw, it's edgy, it's unfiltered. These bad guys are horrible, and he's rubbing it in your face to root for these bad guys almost. Like they,
Definitely.
yeah.
I think that's exactly it. So many of these movies do ask these questions of like, when is torture permissible and everything. And Devil's Rejects kind of rejects this, and it does just ask, like, it's like nobody here is good. They say there's not really a line between them anymore. Bill Forsythe says that. and
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's interesting how it just leans into the empathy of it instead of claiming a moral high ground, or even something like Hostel. Paxton, the main character, takes revenge at the very end, and he does kill the Dutch businessman. But Rejects, just we know that these are the torturers, and it wants us to identify with them. Rob said in the behind the scenes documentary that he did, the real goal, is to make these shitty, horrible people lovable. And by removing the audience surrogate that's in House of a Thousand Corpses, we're left looking for someone to sympathize with. And the way that the police treat them and the natural glee that they have in charisma, you do kind of wind up landing on the Fireflies as anti-heroes, like you said. And on the one hand, it kind of becomes like a parody of utilitarianism, where it's like the torture becomes acceptable as long as the discomfort of the one party creates an acceptable amount of joy for the other. But it does like vindicate you, because you are like, oh, I don't condone this. I feel uncomfortable, and that makes me good, even though I am also enjoying the charisma that they're giving off.
Absolutely. And it's infectious, but then like sometimes there's an act, like something so heinous will happen that like they're
Pull the rug
constantly
out from you.
reminding you.
Yes.
Yeah. And but also they're so cavalier about everything. Like, we see Leatherface in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and we look at him as the most horrific visage of horror because he's wearing literally another person's fucking skin. He's gone full Ed Gein,
Yeah.
full like before Hannibal Lecter put on that guard's face, there was Leatherface. But then so cavalierly, what's his name?
Otis.
Otis, Bill Moseley, puts on some dude's face that he cut off, just like la di
He's
da. Look at
goofing
this.
around.
Yeah, he's goofing around with it. Like they are so crazy. Like they sleep with corpses. Like they are. It's so far beyond the pale,
Yeah.
and by design, it's like again, it's like fuck you. We're shoving this down your throat. Like there's this brothel in the film that's like just the weirdest like sexual fantasy land. Like it's like Disney's California Adventure, yeah, but for sex workers.
That's right. Charlie's Frontier Funland.
Yes.
And you mentioned Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Obviously, Rob is pulling a ton from that movie. He is also pulling from some of the Urbanoia movies like Deliverance, in terms
Yeah.
of the clear class stratification. There's country and southern rock, bric-a-brac decorating, things that might inspire classist reactions even before they do anything wrong. And then Rob, but he kind of switches this up, and he does do this eliciting affection for them and contempt for the victims who get no redemption. And that's really where this becomes kind of a unique movie, because normally these movies are sort of for audiences to fantasize about disempowerment, where a quote normal and undeserving middle class family is attacked but then ultimately regains their social power after having been like cleansed of their elitist corruption by their victimization. And the difference between that and this, and something like The Hills Have Eyes, I think falls perfectly into that. But the zombie movies don't offer that redemption. Even in House of a Thousand Corpses, Otis is taunting people and screaming, maybe it ain't such a good idea to be prancing around where you don't belong. And Zombie is really shifting the perspective to be like, they are the intruders, like these middle class people who are coming to gawk and go to like Uncle Captain Spaulding's tchotchke shop or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they're the intruders, and his sympathies lie with the lower class Spaulding fan, like Spaulding and Firefly family.
Yeah, there is some, like there is a bit of a stay off our land, let us live how we want to live. Like if you look at it, but it's also like, or beware of coming in our land. Like if you go looking for trouble, you'll find it.
Definitely.
Play stupid games, win stupid prizes,
Right.
fuck around and find out, or whatever like phrase you want to apply to it. And then it makes sense that the soundtrack that you mentioned, it's fantastic.
Oh yeah.
And like just as far as like layered with classic rock, layered with southern rock, especially there's so much good filmmaking in this movie. It's really eye-catching and well done. And the opening sequence of the sheriff's raid and the end sequence, I don't know if we should avoid spoilers or anything, but it's a
No, we'll
shootout.
get through. We'll go to
Yeah.
it all. So you don't have to. If you want to touch on something now, that's fine.
Yeah, but just the music really
Yeah.
is well done in this. Like he picked some plum songs
Hmm.
from Skinner and Allman Brothers, and it's really adds a layer to the film.
No doubt. I mean, it's really fantastic. Everything does feel like it fits perfectly. And here's sort of where the like form defines function comes into play, in that Zombie himself resists assimilation, sort of exaggerating stereotypes to get that cinematic freedom. Because your typical film goer might look at a grimy retrosploitation movie like this and say, "Oh dear, I could never lower myself to watch one of these Robert Zombie films."
Yes.
But he still manages to carve out an audience. Not, there are plenty of suburbanites getting their like taboo desires fix through these radically independent people who are not concerned with social mores. And where Rob's work in particular comes into play is that he brings a level of auteurism that didn't always come through in the early era pulp, that 70s grindhouse that you were talking about. And this is kind of reinforced metatextually by including all of these special features, including literally the making of documentary is longer than the movie itself. So they're really saying, like, Rob is an artist. Everything in this is intentional, and you should be taking it seriously, even if it is also fun.
Yeah, yeah. If I could just jump in, like that makes so much sense, and that classism that you were talking about earlier, and the pretentious cineast or a patron of the arts would never lower themselves, and the the art design in this film is fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
The dirt, the grime, and then the casting of just extras like these faces, these truthful, uh, you know, people who have lived look like
Yeah.
they've lived hard Scrabble lives. These
Mm-hmm.
people that look like, oh, you know, fuck Kid Rock, but Kid Rock says, not a fan of his politics.
Yeah. Music's not great
But
either.
yeah, but like he says, I'm straight out the trailer. He's from a wealthy family. That's where he
Yeah.
grew up. But
Yeah. Up in the
these
UP.
people are like some of the people you just like you see sitting there drinking. Like it feels there's an authenticity and there's a visceral dirtiness to what's going on, and it rubs it in your face. It's like you don't want to know these people, and if you did, you wouldn't like it.
Yeah, and this market and the appetite for special features were both really enabled by the DVD market. This kind of came out at the exact right time. I thought it was really interesting that sociologists had predicted that American culture's sort of class fluidity, or at least aspirational class fluidity, would would result in like the quote unquote culturally disadvantaged being able to access high culture. But what they actually found happening was that the literati embraced more trashy entertainment. And so it was more of a downward trend than an upward trend, as far as what they expected.
And I love trash. Trash can be art.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a huge fan, and spiritually, I think this connects with this Rob Zombie film. I'm a huge fan of 1970s John Waters.
Oh, yeah. Female Trouble is
Female
incredible.
Female Trouble, Pink Flamingos. There are a couple others that escape me, but it went for it.
Mm-hmm.
It and it took ideas like family values and Puritanism and certain mores and say, you know what? Fuck what you know.
Right.
This is real life. Like that, this is you got to laugh at everything. You got to laugh at yourself. You got to dissect it, and you got to live. I mean, Divine, the drag queen, amazing actor,
Right.
and actress who was the lead in so many John Waters films. I mean, talk about an anti-hero. Like
Eat shit,
Divine.
kill people, right?
Yes. Yeah. Oh, there's a great, like that great quote. Yes. And it's so anti-establishment, and it's like, it and it's facetious, it's over the top, but at the end of the day, it's a call for freedom because John Waters, he is a gay man, Divine also, and like this is a group of countercultural people who do not have some of the everyday freedoms that the puritanical family values crew, tries to, enforce. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's an ethic here that, yeah, I mean, these films are different, but at the same time, there's there's a beauty to this gore and horror and dirt.
Definitely, definitely so. Let's talk about the cast and crew real quick. You did mention Sid Haig as Captain Spaulding. He's incredible. The rest of our main trio are rounded out by Rob's wife, Sherry Moonzombie as Baby Firefly, and Bill Moseley as Otis Firefly. Like you said, just charisma out the ass from this trio. They are really it's hard to imagine this working as well without these three holding it down.
Yeah, like Bill Moseley, like
Incredible, truly incredible in it.
yeah, just like he literally gets fucking crucified in this movie. He's stigmata through
Yeah.
a chair, and he goes around looking like a combat like Charles Manson by way of Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Oh my God. When he's all
And
Odin-y with the hair covering up one side of his
yes,
face and everything.
oh man, it is like dude looks sick as hell.
Yeah.
and and then Sid Haig, we talked about the clown makeup. There is something just so twisted about this fucking sex clown.
His
And then
teeth are all jacked up.
oh, terrible, dude. Dude needs to floss. And Sherry Moon Zombie's great, and and I just think about like the sense of humor that this movie has, like throwing in that scene where they're in the van on the run,
Oh,
and they want ice cream. There's just the most adorable tutti fucking fruity.
yeah.
It's like it's oh, and then there's one other like this there's little moments of humor throughout this movie when the Groucho Marx film critic expert comes in.
Oh my God.
Was
Well,
that might have been Dan Roebuck. Yeah,
oh,
it was
was
Dan
it?
Roebuck.
Oh my God. It's
Morris
incredible.
Green.
Yeah.
Yeah,
We'll
we
we'll
talked
talk
about it.
about
Yeah.
that scene because I want to go fully in depth on that one.
Oh, it's
It's
so good. And but
incredible.
like just like hitting some more folks on the cast, William Forsythe, who I feel like
Incredible.
he's done so much good stuff in his career. Priscilla Barnes, who was on Three's Company back in the day. Danny Trejo, Diamond Dallas Page, the
Incredible.
comedian Brian
Incredible.
Posehn, who's a huge heavy metal dude, so you probably knew Rob Zombie from that.
Yeah.
And then,
Just several horror legends as well. You know, Rob has never been shy about declaring his love for the giants whose shoulders he's standing on. You know, you have a ton of people. PJ Souls is in this, Michael Berryman, Ken Foray, all of these horror icons who
mm-hmm,
are given fun characters. They don't feel like they're just slotted in to be like, look at who we got. They all feel like they got something to do.
absolutely, absolutely. And then, like, So that like is an homage to the ones who came before him, and then even more of an homage, besides the presence of these people, besides the grindhouse 70s vibe of the film, they're literally watching Bela Lugosi Dracula in the hotel room. This film is a love letter to the horror genre.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Philip Parmet did the cinematography. It's great. He also shot the incredible Harlan County, USA. And his documentary experience is exactly what Rob wanted, someone who could get in there with a handheld and make it feel real. To that end, the editing done by Glenn Garland is more restrained than House of a Thousand Corpses, without the clips of older movies and 16 millimeter footage of the Firefly clan ranting, intruding on the movie. Although we do still get some fun little home video stuff at the very end. And they filmed in 30 exhausting days with a budget of around 7 million, then released on July 22nd, 2005 to 21 million, with almost 500,000 DVD sales in the aftermath. So certainly a success. And it even found an unlikely champion in old Raj Ebert, who gave it 3 stars and said, here is a gaudy vomitorium of a movie, violent, nauseating, and a pretty good example of its genre. If you're a hardened horror movie fan capable of appreciating skill and wit in the service of the deliberately disgusting, The Devil's Rejects may exercise a certain strange charm.
I love
He's
that.
right.
Absolutely.
The rest of the review is actually pretty funny too, so I recommend that people check it out, especially the end where he's like, I accurately described this movie, so I don't want to get any emails from people who said it was gross. All right, so let's get into the actual movie. They start off with forensic photos in the aftermath to remind us of their crimes in 1,000 Corpses, and a Chainsaw Massacre style text intro that says, on May 18th, 1978, Sheriff John Quincy Wydell, along with the local authorities in Ruggsville County, led a search and destroy mission on a decaying farmhouse. Inside the house, police discovered a collection of diaries and scrapbooks detailing the accounts of more than 75 murders. The family responsible for these brutal crimes was forever to be known as the Devil's Rejects. And again, like we said, he's not shy about hitting these homages. It's so Texas Chainsaw off the bat that you're like, I am in the right mindset now. I understand
Mhm.
that this is going to be like Texas Chainsaw, but actually show all of the implied violence that's
Yeah,
in that one.
true. And it's and like yeah, the this house, like you can't stress it enough.
Ooh,
Just the
looks like
the
it stinks for sure.
filth. Yeah. Yeah, the filth and disrepair, the detritus, just nightmarish right out of the gate.
That's right. Let's do what God made us to do, says the sheriff. And I did think it was interesting how quickly the human moments in the shootout that ensue, like Mother Firefly weeping about baby looking like an angel when she was born, do help to balance against the dispassionate violence, and almost immediately sets them up as the underdogs, despite the fact that we just saw Otis canoodling a cadaver.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's I feel like you don't quite realize until a little bit later that, oh, this is a dead person in
Right.
his bed.
Yeah, it all of a sudden it zooms in on the lips and you see that they're like a little blue and you're like, oh
Yeah,
shit.
right?
The shootout, I think, also looks really good. They shot in one day, which is kind of shocking because of how many different angles it's shot from. And then the switch to the surreal slow mo when the tear gas gets launched. It's just a fun shootout to start.
Totally, totally. And that's what, like, I thought it was really apt at the top of the show today, George, when you mentioned that there were elements of the Western in this.
Yeah,
The
very Rio
lands
Bravo.
the landscape, the way certain characters like William Forsythe and others carry themselves, absolutely. And the shootouts for sure.
Yeah. And the homemade body armor is fun, and they take a few cops with them, but they can
Yeah,
only stand for so long. So RJ Firefly lays down his life, and the cops take Mama into custody while Baby and Otis run out the basement passage through the jail that they kept their prisoners in. And Midnight Rider plays as the title card and opening credits roll.
yeah, and it's just fucking badass.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It
Sorry,
is.
y'all. It's just badass.
You can't deny it. They trick this woman into stopping and kill her for her car. R.I.P. to Good Samaritan Abby. And
Yup.
this
Oh, man. They are
this
ruthless.
they really are. And the still frame of the car driving off with the corpse lying in the road, as written and directed by Rob Zombie, appears, and then it all fades to black. It just looks so good. It really captures the movie, the sort of verisimilitude that it's capturing in that photo. Just great. Just really great stuff. A news report details their crimes as cops dig through the scene and find some photos of their father, who the sheriff recognizes as Captain Spaulding the Clown. And we do get that fun intro where he has this sex dream that turns into murder. They do a good job of not tipping you off that it's a dream. And then he wakes
Mm
up and his girlfriend is like, "Oh, was it a bad dream?" And he goes, 50-50.
hmm. Yeah. Funny, dirty, kind of, you know, a little perverse. I mean, I feel like this film. I don't know. I was thinking about it afterwards. I was wondering, like, is there like a level of misogyny in this film? Maybe a little. Might be like for it was made in 2005. But then again, it's like no, these motherfuckers want to kill everyone. They want to disembowel everyone. They want to cut people's faces off there. So yeah, it's more less misogyny and more misanthropy.
Yeah, absolutely. I also do love, Rob uses the Kuleshov effect here to great effect for a joke when Captain Spaulding is like, "I gotta piss," and then suddenly you're looking at a thick brown stream and you're like, "Cripes," until you realize it's coffee.
Yep, yep.
Really good stuff. Again, just like
Yeah,
people think that
editing.
there's no filmmaking in this and that it's just trash, but like there are really good edits and lighting and everything.
Yes.
It's a real a filmmaker's film for sure.
Yep. Agreed.
His commercial is interrupted by a special bulletin about the shootout when the sheriff swears to hunt them down, and then he gets a call from Baby, who warns him about the encroaching storm. So they agree to meet at the Kahiki Motel, just like they always planned. There's a funny billboard there that says "On the run again." There's always time for a quick bite at Elliot's Diner. But then also, Rob said on the commentary that the reason they built this is because otherwise you'd see the set for the motel just behind them.
Got it. It worked.
Sure did. This is when we're introduced to Ken Foray as Charlie and Michael Berryman as Cleavon at Charlie's Frontier Funtown brothel. Very funny conversation here about the prostitute Candy needing a new angle, but he's hesitant about it being Star Wars because the last thing he needs is horny robots running around tripping over shit. And then Michael Berryman
Yes.
goes, "They call them droids."
Oh, and Candy is we were talking about a little bit about Tim Burton. Were we talking about? Did we mention
I
Burton or
don't think
Pee
that
Wee's
he
Big
came up.
Adventure?
Oh, yeah,
Oh,
Pee Wee. Yeah, Pee Wee did come up.
yeah, Pee Wee. But yeah, Candy
Dottie.
was Dottie from Pee Wee's Big Adventure.
Yes.
I like. I was thrilled to see that Pee Wee's Big Adventure, one of my faves.
It's incredible. Really
Yeah.
amazing movie. Captain Spaulding calls to let them know he's on his way over. And meanwhile, at the Kahiki Palms, the band Banjo and Sullivan are checking in, comprised of Wendy and Adam Banjo, Roy and Gloria Sullivan, and Rhodey Jimmy, who, like you said, is played by Brian Posehn. I was reading up on these characters, and hilariously, their hit song was "Lord, Don't Let Me Die in a Cheap Motel."
Oh, how prophetic. And the sorry, the one of the members of the band was is the Jeffrey Lewis, who recently passed away, the father of Juliette Lewis.
Oh, shit. I didn't even realize that.
Yeah, and he's a recognizable character actor. That's yeah, he's got quite an IMDb.
Oh, yeah. He's really great. And Roy Sullivan goes to the ice machine when he's approached by Baby, and he tries to impress her with his stories of shaking hands with Johnny Cash. And she says, "I love famous people. They're so much better than the real thing." And this is kind of the first taste of one of the themes. It is, first of all, a very funny line, but
Yeah.
then also plays into this idea that does crop up, which is this like myth making, the idea of becoming larger than life, and the legacy that you leave behind, where because there's no line, we'll see that time and again that despite the fact that they're becoming infamous rather than famous, they are becoming myths in sort of the grand tradition of the American West and the outlaw and everything.
Mm-hmm.
That the anti-hero aspect of it is raising them into legend.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one more thing about the actor Jeffrey Lewis. Just I'm just looking at his IMDb right now. Dude has 227 credits. Just yeah, yeah, goes way back into. My man was on Barnaby Jones back in the 70s. Every Which Way But Loose, the Mission
Incredible.
Impossible TV show, Gunsmoke, Cannon, Mod
Wow.
Squad.
He was
uh,
doing it.
yeah.
He She aggressively comes on to him as a distraction for Otis, who sneaks up behind him with a gun. And they've really got the old rope-a-dope down to a science between the waitress and this.
Oh yeah.
It does also look great though. There's these close-ups as he's getting like sucked into the conversation. The cinematographer like gets up in her face and everything. And Otis takes them back to the room where they're all made hostage. And it does play with the darkly comic when Brian Posehn is quickly shot in the head and everyone screams except Adam, who immediately pukes. Captain Spaulding's gas is dry, so he rolls into Buck's Grab and Go, where PJ Souls from Halloween is Susan, a woman that he knocks right the fuck out for her car, traumatizing her son and driving away with a cackle.
Oh, he's so good.
He really is. Um, and the Fireflies decide to torture the band. And Bill Moseley has been really having fun with the taunting. It has been hard not to be having fun with him. And so in this moment where they pull the rug out from under you and it becomes super real as he rapes Gloria, and there's this awful ambient tone. We've had the fun, warm Southern rock and everything, and it becomes this awful tone. And it's a grim, grim scene. And as we spend time away from the alternatively terrible group of cops, you do sort of, like you said, like you spend time with these people and it starts out fun, but quickly you realize, like, oh, I don't really want to spend time with them.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you get it, it's like a bait and switch, a constant bait and switch, because it's like, oh man, these these people are the embodiment of the id. They
Mm,
are this, like, they just want to have fun in their own weird way. But then, yeah, you're reminded, like, oh, this is brutal and horrific and despicable.
yeah. And Bill Moseley was really having trouble with this scene. He said that the level of cruelty required for it was like frightening and it really bummed him out, was the quote he said. so so Rob took him aside and he said just four words to him. He said, "Art is not safe." And this, he said, inspired him. And the people on the crew were like crying, watching the monitors at how intense and real the scene felt. But in the commentary, Zombie said that that was the goal, is to really make it feel real. And that he almost wished that he had made the entire or the entire movie take place just in the room.
Wow. Too
Um,
much, Rob. Too much.
Too much.
Yeah, I'm glad you didn't do that, Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Hey, I
If
love
you're
a bottle
listening.
episode as much as the next guy, but the road trip
Oh
is the
yeah,
whole thing.
right. Listen, the Breaking Bad Fly episode was great,
That's
but
right.
yeah, I'm glad we yeah, I'm glad they got out of the motel.
Yeah. He stops abruptly, saying that they make him sick and that the boys have an errand to run. So out they go. Meanwhile, Sheriff Wydell is interrogating I cannot say Firefly tonight. Interrogating Mother Firefly, which turns to assault after she taunts him about his brother's death. And it becomes pretty clear that she's the like ultimate victor of this encounter. Again, the 16 millimeter film and the handheld style really look great here as things become more intense.
Hmm.
Fooled Around and Fell in Love plays on the radio as they drive past the abandoned chicken coop. And the fact that Roy likes it disgusts Otis, who thought he was a real cowboy type. And again, this idea of being sort of like true to yourself as well sort of crops up, the idea of not having to care about what social mores and everything are holding these guys back, who he has to put on a cowboy hat to sell records or whatever. They are unabashedly themselves, to the dismay of everybody else.
Absolutely.
They follow this yellow brick road, which is just a bunch of yellow stuff, which I thought was really funny, to a cache
Oh
of
yeah, I didn't really
guns.
think about that. Yeah.
And they go to this cache of guns that Otis hid, and there's some great taunting and everything. But Adam gets the drop on Otis after he gets carried away, threatening Roy. And there's this fun little scrap there where he eventually gets both of the men back on their backs. Adam bleeding out from a gunshot wound to the neck, plus a gut stab, and Roy gets beat to hell. And this is one of the scenes that we had alluded to earlier, where Otis is like railing against God and Adam being a hero, and the hair is like covering half of his face, and he gets really serious, more serious than we've seen him up to this point. And he says, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work." And it turns out that the devil's work, besides fiddle competitions, is killing the hell out of these guys.
Yep. Yep. Uh, and it just showed you the brutality and the enjoyment that they took from it. And this is the ride we're signing up for with the Devil's Rejects. That
Right.
like that is these guys' mo. Like they're so charismatic, but sometimes you momentarily forget that they like that they're complete socio psychopaths without a shred of a moral compass.
Exactly. And back at the motel, Baby trades Wendy slapping the crap out of Gloria for letting her go to the bathroom. I mentioned the lighting before. This is all filmed indoors, but it really looks like sun coming through those windows. They did an amazing job with the lighting in this.
Oh
The
yeah.
hotel set in particular really looks fantastic. And Wendy obviously immediately starts screaming out the window for help. Why wouldn't you? And
Mm-hmm.
when Baby is distracted, Gloria grabs the gun and threatens her. But she doesn't just pull the trigger immediately. So Baby does this underhanded, literally and figuratively knife throw right into her damn heart.
Oh yeah.
Rip.
Man, that was wicked sweet knife throw. Also, I would like to see George. Like that scene made me think about every time in a movie, either a horror movie or an action movie or what have you, where one character's got the drop on someone else with a gun, and then it's like goodbye, click, the gun's not loaded. Like just
Uh,
that, like I've got you dead to rights now. Click, gun's not loaded.
yeah.
Like I feel like I've seen that one. That's an oldie but a goodie, an oldie but a goodie.
Oh, yeah. It's super satisfying, especially because, like, Baby offers her ass up, literally her ass, to get shot, and it does click, and there's nothing in there, and so it's this brutal twist. Like, I mean, like you said, we've seen it before, but it's just so effective to be like, there wasn't really a chance for them to get back at them, but also like it was all just like mental, like a power game for
Yeah,
Otis and everything. Like ultimately, the knives they Roy had a knife, so they were, I guess, like equally matched in terms of weaponry and everything. But um, yeah, it makes you like re-examine everything that we saw up to that point, and your heart just drops.
totally.
And Captain Spald, excuse me, Baby, Wendy makes a break for it, but much like Sally running to the cook for help in Chainsaw, she runs right into the dang clown's arms, who promptly headbutts her into unconsciousness.
Ooh, wow. Yeah, that was a rough one.
Yeah. Captain Spaulding's connection to the Marx Brothers film Animal Crackers is nailed by one of the cops, who sends for the town's movie critic. And you mentioned it before, this amazing, bizarre, funny scene. This Gene Shalit looking guy
Yes.
rolls in.
What a throwback.
Oh my God. I happen to be a self proclaimed Marx Brothers expert, if I say so myself. And they get into this argument about men of myth, Groucho and Elvis Presley. And fuck Groucho, it's a very funny line. But obviously, these figures looming large are meant to draw a parallel to the Firefly clan. Now at this point, they've been on the news constantly. They've been given the nickname the Devil's Rejects. They're talking about how it's the worst crime in American history. Good or bad, their name will live on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I don't know, it adds such a delightful whimsical layer to the film that these characters are all that they all have these names that are derivative or from the Marx Brothers.
Yes.
And what was the Wolf
Wolf J. Flywheel.
Wolf J Flywheel, man, so good. Uh, yeah, I love it.
Absolutely. Um, Otis bursts into the motel room and he scares Baby and Captain Spaulding because they don't recognize him on account of he's made a mask out of Adam's face. And
Oh,
it's really grim. The two men have a little power clash, but that gets put on hold so that they can get out of there. But not before Otis Chainsaw Massacre 2's Wendy, putting the mask on her just like Leatherface did to Stretch.
oh man, yeah. Wendy, is she? I mean, she survived up until that point, but she was not having a good time.
Yeah. I also will say that that scene in Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 is like one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever seen. Like, that's another movie where there's a lot of humor to it and everything, but
Mm-hmm.
it really takes a turn in that moment where you realize what's happening and
Yeah.
she has to just like stay there quietly pretending to be a corpse under her friend's face.
Oh,
It's fucked up. It's a really
yeah.
great scene. But the maid comes by to clean the next morning. It's not a great sight in the bathroom. The corpses are piled in the shower, and there's writing and blood on the walls, including a hard one to see in the mirror that Rob said is supposed to say, fuck Wydell. I was like trying to figure out what it said for a pretty
Oh,
long time. And then
yeah.
he,
I missed that one. Yeah. They that room that made they left that room a real mess for her, and they didn't even leave a tip.
ugh, unbelievable. That would have been really funny if they just like looked and there was just like a pile of money on the
Yeah.
bed.
Or just like a $5 bill next to the lamp.
The worst part though is that Wendy is hanging on the door, and when the maid tries to leave, Wendy falls on her, begging for help through her gag, then chases the maid in a parody of the conclusion of the first Chainsaw Massacre. She
Mm.
runs into the road and promptly gets splattered by a truck. It's even
Oh,
like comic framing, like it's a flat, wide shot, and even as grotesque as it is, you're like, those Duke boys did it again.
yeah, and it really reinforces, like you touched on it earlier, that the the victims did not have their they did not have their comeuppance. Or sorry, they did not get
The redemption, yeah.
their revenge, their redemption. No, quite the opposite. The victims are roadkill.
Yeah,
You know,
literally, yeah.
the victims just one after another just get obliterated here.
That's right. And Wydell comes to investigate, and he's joined by Danny Trejo and Diamond Dallas Page himself as some bounty hunters, Rondo and Billy Ray Snipper, who are on the trail of the list of Groucho characters.
Or as William Forsythe's deputy calls them, got a couple of shit kickers over there.
He's fun. I like the deputy. He's a
So
good
do
one too.
I,
Yeah.
with his ski jump nose.
He's got his thick
Yeah, mutton
sideburns and
chops.
everything.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. The Fireflies are driving to Charlie's for safety, and they see this sign for ice cream in 10 miles, which, like you said, Baby wants to stop for. Otis and her squabble, and the captain gets involved, and you gotta laugh as they chant Tutti fucking fruity at Otis. And this is a pivotal moment for Rob. He says that this arguing in the car on a road trip, that's something we've all done. It's relatable for audiences, and it's another human moment for them. And it's meant to make you forget the fact that this comes so quickly on the heels of watching all of the horrific shit that they just did to Wendy and the band and everything. And then it hasn't affected them in the slightest. And so we like put it out of our mind. We go, well, I'm not thinking about that anymore because
Yeah.
she stuck a little ice cream on his nose, and that's fun.
Oh, the fireflies are cute.
The sheriff dreams of returning to the compound where he's haunted by the ghost of George, who tells him to kill them. Tom Towles plays George. He was Otis in Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. You could really say that the supporting cast in this is a murderer's row.
Ah, I see what you did there. I like it.
He's really great in this too, though, and the sort of switching back and forth between like sad sap and like angry villain ghost who's convincing him to kill is intense. He's awoken by a call from the bounty hunters, though, who track down a connection to Wolf J. Flywheel, the Groucho character from the big store, and he goes by the name Charlie Altamont now. The shit is on, they say. But the sheriff has been convinced by the ghost of George to become the very thing he was hunting. So he heads down to the jail cell and he stabs the crap out of Mama Firefly, who dies
Yeah.
how she lived, making weird sex noises and tongue gyrations.
It's true. She and for a second there, I was like, wait, is that Faye Dunaway? There was a
Oh,
very Faye Dunaway look to
she
Mama
did.
Firefly.
Yeah, she really did. It was what was her name? I just had it here. I know she originally. Oh, it's Leslie
Leslie
Easterbrook.
Easterbrook. Yeah.
Right. And she actually originally auditioned for Gloria Sullivan. And then they were like, no, you should be Mother Firefly instead. So how about
Yeah.
that? The remaining Firefly fam makes it Charlie's Frontier Funland. We've talked a little bit about the name, but it does kind of harken back to a time where things were quote unquote simpler and more brutal. And this kind of sums it up. You know, you could be a rascal on the frontier, and who could say no? There were brothels, there was drugs, there was violence, and this is sort of all brought into one place in this set. Charlie also he walks out and he holds them at shotgun point to the Firefly's surprise until he shoots at the captain and it's a water gun. And again, you're just like, we're laughing. It's pranks for the Fireflies.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie also
Yeah.
reveals that he's the brother of the captain.
Yeah. Just a couple of brothers messing around.
Time to party, baby. The neons come out, so does the drugs and booze. And it's so funny to contrast this with the sheriff sitting there grimly practicing his speech and chanting, Lord, I am your arm of justice. And you're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, I kind of like these are the options, I guess I'm gonna hang out with the Fireflies.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, they're the worst people to ever grace this earth, but they're fun to hang with.
That's right.
Like, man.
It's also amazing for there to still be people for them to look down on as they go to buy some chickens for Captain Spaulding's famous fried chicken. And they're stopped by the sheriff, who traps Charlie's hand in the door and threatens him to have the devil's rejects present and accounted for at midnight. The bounty hunters sneak in, they murder some of the sex workers, then hold the Fireflies at gunpoint while they wait for the sheriff. There's no dialogue in the mix, which is really cool. There's lots of slow mo. There's a fun scene. Captain Spaulding's just like smoking a J out there.
Yeah. Although the one thing I'll say, Charlie Altamont did not have, he did not show any, I think requisite like sadness or
Mm,
sympathy for like his ladies being killed. That was a little weird to me.
that was weird. Yeah, he was just like cost of doing business kind of thing, which
Yeah.
was come on, man. I guess he didn't have a ton of choice, but he didn't look that upset either.
Yeah, I guess when you're friends with the Fireflies,
Mm,
anything is possible.
people
Don't
die.
get too don't get too attached.
Sheriff Wydell executes his "I've been looking for you" clown that he'd been practicing, and then
Hmm.
shoots him in the leg while DDP kicks the crap out of Otis. They're packed in the trucks, and again, it's just music in the mix as the sheriff cackles and drives them like a madman to the compound.
Hmm.
And he says, I gotta thank you all for helping me to understand what my heritage is as he ties them up. The Wydells have always been vigilante justice. Now, my granddaddy, he rode with the likes of Tom Horn, killing scum like you for a living. We've always been devil slayers. And Tom Horn was a Pinkerton and a hired gun who was very quick on the trigger and famously felt no guilt and was eventually hanged for murder.
Oh
So
wow.
to he's clearly like identifying with these people who he's like, oh, I'm saying that they're good, but famously the Pinkertons were insanely violent and everything. And
Oh yeah, they were just jackboots for corporate and government, right?
right,
Yeah,
and so it's like,
probably
well, do
beating up
you
poor and underprivileged people.
Right. Do you want to identify with these people? And so it's again just you're like, ah, man, like the line is so fine, and it takes so little to almost make it non-existent. So,
Mm-hmm.
and he invokes God to justify violence. He claims to have tried to walk the line of conventional justice, but he says, we're here. We're playing on a level that most will never see. And Zombie on the DVD commentary suggests that this does sum up the film. He says, good and evil don't matter anymore. So
Mm.
there you go. And civilization's supposed superiority and the moral authority of the state quickly give way to what was supposedly the amorality exclusive to the Fireflies, because he starts torturing them right back. He's beating them with liquor bottles. He's stapling photos of the victims to their chests. He's cattle prodding them. And he finally shows Baby photos of her dead mother, which is the first thing that kind of breaks through their shell here. And this is when he also nails Otis to the chair while reciting some Bible verse, and then sets the house on fire. And truly, you're like, all of the shit that we've seen them doing, like this feels as bad as what we've seen them do. Even though you're like,
Yes.
maybe he has some quote unquote motivation in that he's looking for revenge for his brother who they did kill, and he has the authority of the state behind him. Uh, you're like, this is not a good person.
Absolutely. I feel it. And that, I mean, that's a theme that really resonates. And that shows that, oh, maybe for this one instance in this movie, rooting for this horrific family, it might be the lesser. Well, I don't know about that. But William
This is the
Forsythe,
thing.
yeah, he's complicit. Like and it calls in the bigger picture, that's something that resonates today as far as extrajudicial killings
Right.
and justice far from being served.
Right. Exactly. And he promises Baby something special, and he even releases her, and he chases her with his axe through some very vocal cows.
Yeah.
But when she dips into a little shack, she finds Charlie, who did come for them, but he gets axed in the chest by Wydell, who's right behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Again, no redemption. He tries to do the right thing, immediately gets killed for it. And
Yep.
also, is that the right thing? Because he's trying to help this murderous psychopath.
Yeah. It's there. The moral compass is out the window
Exactly.
at this point. No one is right, but you can, it's kind of like Succession. They're all bad people, but can't help but watch them. I mean,
Exactly. And someone's got,
yeah,
you got to cheer for someone in a
yep,
conflict.
there it is.
He shoots her in the leg, and he starts whipping her with a leather strap. And just like Otis said earlier, they all say fuck you, and Baby does too, which I thought was funny. So Wydell goes for the kill, choking her out until he's freaking neck snapped by Tiny from the beginning, who's still doing just fine. And we all just assumed he got killed, but he hid.
Yeah, we didn't see we only saw him in the beginning, and then we he disappeared for 3/4 of the movie, and there he was,
He's back.
and this guy, I forget his, McGrory.
Right.
Yeah, he's the actual, kind of a tragic story. The film is dedicated to him. He's the 7'9" actor who had size 26 feet,
Yeah.
and he just, uh, obviously had and a growth hormone imbalance or something. Kind of a tragic story, his personal life, but great in the film. And he was also in. He's a Tim Burton veteran of
That's right. He's in Big Fish, I
Fish,
believe.
Big Fish. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, he unfortunately died in 2005. So yeah, the in the credits, this is dedicated to him. So a nice shout out. He is good in this, and he sends him for Otis and the captain, and he does get them out. And you get this nice family reunion where everyone is hurt but alive. And these Teflon hellbillies.
Yes. Bloodied, but not down.
That's right. And they drive away, promising to come back for Tiny, but he walks sadly back to the house. He knows it's over, Rob says, and so he kills himself in this exploding house. tragic. He was there
Yeah.
just to save them, and then said, "Well, they're never coming back."
I mean, Tiny could have, there was so much he could have done.
Mm. Yeah, Rob was like, they probably would have arrested him, and he didn't want to do that. So,
You know
um,
what? Yeah, Tiny's logic is his
it's
own.
flawless. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's morning, and Freebird is playing over these soaring camera sweeps. Rob said they used every second of their helicopter rental footage. And we get some intercut footage of them in happier times, just being a family. And again, this idea of legacy at any cost comes up in the song. If I leave here tomorrow, would you still remember me? You're like, who is that normal family? It could just be anybody. But because now this car is full of the devil's rejects, they're somebody's.
Mm-hmm.
And they're all bleeding in their seats when Otis spots a police checkpoint ahead, just waiting to blow them away. So he feels the wind in his hair, he smiles, and he wakes the gang. And they all pull out their own guns and go down fighting. And this is how he gets it. You have to respect their defiance to the end. And it's
Yep.
great seeing the bullet holes appear, even though it's like the music, and then it cuts, and the music drops out, and you just hear the gunfire as it freeze frames. It's really fantastic. I love this quote from Rob where he says, it just sort of sums up the whole thing because in the end, these are bad people, but they're played out like Bonnie and Clyde. They are typical American Western outlaws. It's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He's not only sympathetic to his trashy characters, but does elevate them to myth in the way that they meet their end. It's a perfect ending to this movie. I just think it's great.
Yeah, they went out on their own motherfucking terms, like a la, just like you were saying, Butch and Sundance, Bonnie and Clyde. Let's add Thelma and Louise to that.
Hell yeah.
Uh, yeah, and the slow mo to that sequence, like that is some great action sequence directing and camera work. Man, I was just like probably there's so much memorable stuff. There's so much to like. There's so much idiosyncratic stuff in this film. But the opening gun battle and the end gun battle, damn good.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Good filmmaking.
Absolutely. And now, Hal, we've reached the part of the episode where we sum up
Yes.
why it's not just a good horror movie, but is in fact the best horror movie ever made. And I'm going to let you start.
I feel like I touched on it earlier, and I will say it's the best horror movie ever made because Rob Zombie knows what came before him, acknowledges it, and celebrates it. This is a party. This is a party of the horror genre, and he takes it to the hilt, and he doesn't do it on a 7 or an 8. He floors it. He floors it as he heads towards that checkpoint, and he goes out in a blaze of glory. It's a fantastic celebration of what is so many things that are great and impactful about the horror genre.
I totally agree. To me, this is the best horror movie ever made because it almost functions as like an art manifesto from Rob, I think, in that there is a almost autobiographical nature, not to the actions that are happening, but to the ethos behind it. The idea of casting these ideas of what's acceptable to the wind and doing what makes you feel good and embracing the grindhouse and viscera and everything and saying, I don't want this to be accessible to every single person. That this is for me and my like-minded compatriots, and the people who deserve to find it will find it. And there is brilliant filmmaking in it. We talked about it that people they see the aesthetic of it and they say this can't have any artistic merit. And even beyond the messaging in it, maybe we read too much into the classism stuff or whatever as people might
Sure.
say. But even if you say that, the actual filmmaking techniques in this movie are fantastic. There are so many great edits and great ways that things are lit. So often the the exteriors of the motel and maintaining the exact energy like weeks later to film things inside the room and everything, that's hard. That's really hard. And this is a cast of characters that or a cast of actors who are really bringing it to a movie that needs 100%. It's very demanding roles, and they really kill it. It's also, pretty refreshing to get a lot of older actors. There's like a lot of older people in this, and
Yeah.
it just kind of makes it stand out. I really like that about it.
And you know what? There's a lot of horror that fits different categories. There's young adult horror, like the Fear Street movies on Netflix. There's monsters. This horror is just a throwback, and it fucking goes hard.
Hell
You know,
yes.
yeah, and it doesn't care. It doesn't, and all these horror, like so many horror movies have like an antiseptic version of murder or of killing. Nope, nope. This is in your face. It curb stomps the audience with visuals, and for that unrelenting filmmaking and like just delivery system of sick fucking visuals one after another,
Oh yeah.
it you gotta respect what it set out to do. This movie, I feel like, accomplished didn't just accomplish what it set out to do. It's way better than it had any right to be. Because how do the laughs and the delightful whimsical moments coexist with the sheer brutality? That is deft filmmaking, as you said. Just one more example that you can have all this stuff coexist: the homages, the sexuality, the 70s aesthetic, and the humor, the extreme violence. It's just a beautiful gumbo.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Hal, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. This was an absolute blast. Please plug time, tell the people where they can find you, check you out on social, all that jazz.
Thanks so much, George. So you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Hal Rudnick, HalRudnick. If you're on Twitch at all, I do a daily live stream Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Pacific time at twitch.tv/Hal Rudnick. And I talk about streaming news and what's new, and do some reviews with my pal Lon Harris from Screen Junkies. And we do that on our show Binge Boys, our podcast Binge Boys, wherever fine podcasts are streamed.
Hell yeah. I absolutely recommend it all. Hal is a very, very funny guy. Lon is very funny as well. And I mean, you guys know your stuff. There's no putting that in a box. So definitely check it out.
As do you, George. This was
Thank you.
this was a straight up pleasure. Thank you, my friend.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure as well. As far as my plugs, you can find me on Twitter at Little Horror PHL. That username applies pretty much everywhere: Instagram, Letterboxd, the Patreon. If you're really enjoying the show, you can get all kinds of fun bonus episodes and stuff over there. We've talked about video games like Resident Evil 2 and PT. We've talked about things that maybe don't necessarily fit directly in best horror movie ever made, like Begotten, but still definitely merits discussion. We talked with Branson Reese about the 13 best animated horror shorts from 1929 to 1953. So truly, anything and everything can be found over on the Patreon. It's a lot of fun, some great discussions. Check that out for just a couple bucks a month. And if you really don't want to spend any money, you can at least rate and review, folks. so, so do all that stuff. That's it. Thanks again, Hal. Bye.